Hello everyone. In today's video, we're taking a little bit of a slight turn. Instead of talking about new features or things that we would like you to do or new interactive guides we've created or all the other great stuff you find on this channel, we're actually going to dig into a customer and hear how he and his school is using Intune for Education to respond to remote learning. So we are going to have Jeff from Puyallup. I've tried so hard to get it right. I probably won't say it once I bring him on the call just for my own integrity. But we have Jeff joining us today to talk about his school's journey through device management, ending with Intune, and kind of learning about what his pain points are, what he's looking to solve in the coming year, and how Intune has answered a lot of questions for him. Without further ado, let's get started. Hello, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining our partner call today. I'm joining the Intune for Education partner channel. Usually we talk about new features that are coming out. We talk about great opportunities. And we don't get a lot of opportunity to talk to end user IT, the folks that are actually using the product with their students, with their staff, and what your needs are. And at the end of the day, it's all about what you, Jeff, needs in their school so that students can learn, teachers can teach, and everyone's happy and IT kind of just works or happens. So I would love to hear more about you, Jeff, and where do you work? What do you do? I'm not going to try to say the name. I tried, I practiced. It just doesn't come across as genuine or authentic or whatever. So Jeff, introduce yourself and the school you work at.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I'm really glad to be here and to be a partner in this interview. And so my name is Jeff Hinkle. I am the Technology Services Manager at the Puyallup School District in Washington State. We have 23,000 students and almost 4,000 staff as part of our school district. We have about 32 buildings. So we have 22 elementaries, we have 7 junior highs, 3 comprehensive high schools, and then 1 alternative high school. And then we also have kind of like a digital learning school environment in our school district as well. And we are currently about the 8th largest school district in the state. And right now, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are in remote learning. So majority of our students are at home or wherever they are at as they are engaging in their learning. And quite a few of our staff and teachers are also in a remote learning as well. And so as part of that, they are having to figure out the different way that we have to teach and that we have to learn. And so we have small pockets of students who are actually coming on site at this time, but most of the learning is happening in a remote way.
Yeah, and obviously that presents challenges. You are physically at a building right now because you need to be, because students need devices, infrastructure needs to occur, it needs to be set up, maintained. You are an essential worker when it comes to learning because all of the teachers and students are elsewhere doing their learning right now. They're engaged in remote and hybrid learning, but IT still needs to exist. So thinking about that, and not just the pandemic, but before the pandemic, after the pandemic, what are some challenges that you face as a school IT person?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the biggest challenge that we at IT are always tasked with is people, our users, right, our end users, they always want it to just work. So we hear often here, well, just make it work. They obviously don't understand or know all the different pieces or all the different technologies or all the different challenges that are a part of just making it work, but that's the experience that they're looking for. And so we have to make sure that learning can continue and that we make sure that we're not the ones who are making it difficult or impacting it in such a way so that way learning can be on the forefront of what we do here in IT in the school district. And so whether that's the business office, making sure that they can run payroll, to HR, to making sure that they can deal with all of their personnel, to the fact that teachers and students are learning, both on teaching side and then the learning side for students. So our job in IT is to make sure that all of that works, all of that comes together, all of that is integrated. And that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge in any school district, let alone in the IT department, where the reliance on technology now has become so crucial during this pandemic time. And my hope would be is that I don't see that changing even as we come out of that, is that there's still going to be that underlying reliance on technology and for it to just work. A lot of the other things that our users are looking for is to have as much flexibility as possible, but at the same time, we have to make sure that it's not going to cause the security to be at risk. And so we have to kind of weigh that back and forth, is how much flexibility can we give our staff and our students while at the same time not compromising on the security and the standards that we have to put in place. So things like, can I install my own software for staff and students? And right now in our district, we have chosen not to do that. But we do provide all of the software that our staff and students need into a central hub of company portal, because we use Intune to manage our devices. And we use cloud technology such as the OneDrive and SharePoint for not only saving all of your files, but then also for sharing and submitting and doing all of that work as well. And also knowing that we have to, on the back end, then figure out the ways that we can secure that, make sure that it's not going to be able to be open for leaking of any kind, or that there's retention in the case that things need retention. So there's a lot of this, how do we provide flexibility at the same time making sure that we're obeying the law, and also making sure that we're safeguarding our staff and our students and our systems in our environment. A lot of the things, especially now, that are being asked of us is to additional projects or needs that maybe weren't thought of before, but now are needed. So like health attestations are a big thing as staff come on site, and visitors and students they need to fill out a health attestation form as part of that. So we utilized a lot of the Microsoft cloud technologies as a part of that. But as these new requests come in, it becomes difficult because we already have an existing workload or projects that we're trying to get done. So trying to weigh out like which one kind of takes priority over the other. People obviously are trying to think to the future and also what's needed here and now. So trying to really narrow down the focus of the work we do, so then that way it actually meets the needs of the district and of our community. And then the other challenge I would say is, how do we leverage the current security technologies that we have with Microsoft as part of our licensing? And then how do you implement that and maintain it, all while not adding additional staffing? So we have not added any additional staffing, yet we know that these are things that we need to be looking into, and we need to make a part of our processes and part of the changes that we make in this environment. So I'd say that those four things are kind of the biggest challenges and the challenging aspects of the work that we do.
So, device management, you've been managing devices since devices have existed. There was maybe if you were early iPad adopters at some point, there was no management early on for iPads, or schools weren't managing them. But PCs have always been managed in schools for at least as long as I can remember. Maybe in the early on, before I can remember, they weren't. But there's always been some type of PC management. There's been GPOs, there's been SCCM, there's been Intune, there's third party, there's lots of other ecosystems and competitors out there. What made you land on Intune as a good solution for your school?
Yeah, we were, like you said, we were using SCCM already as our device management solution. But the difficulty we had was that it was not working well. And at the time, we had to then evaluate, well, where did we want to spend our dollars, our time, our energy, our resources into making a product work? And at the time, we were working with a lot of the Microsoft account reps and other people, and built a relationship with Microsoft to try to understand, well, what is Intune? We heard about it. We've kind of seen it. It's been around for, or it's been advertised for quite some time, But in 2015, when we were kind of first thinking through our one-to-one program and knowing that we were going to eventually have over 20,000 devices, we wanted to come up with a solution that we knew was sustainable, that could manage that many, and also be a lot easier to move us forward in the direction that we wanted. So what made us choose Intune was that it was a cloud-based technology. So the infrastructure that we have with our SCCM environment was no longer needed. It provided extreme amounts of flexibility. So that way it was, web-based. It could obviously always connect to devices, stuff like that. And the other thing that we wanted too in a management solution was one that was scalable and could handle all of our various different needs, but not at the expense of becoming so complicated that you had to have like an exorbitant amount of staff to kind of make sure that environment and that infrastructure was working. So that's what led us to Intune. Was we knew it was a cloud-based technology. We knew that as long as the device had an internet connection and could reach Microsoft, that it was going to get any software we needed, any of the lockdowns or changes that we needed to make, and all of those technologies in that. So that's kind of what led us to that decision. We tried Intune back in 2017, and we went down at first. We engaged a partner, and we tried to walk down that road when CoManagement was kind of first released. What we ran into was that it didn't work, and actually we had failed in our ability to kind of make that change for that upcoming one-to-one rollout. So we actually had to re-image every single device over and do that. And then what we did is in 2017, we decided, okay, CoManagement is not the road that we want to go down. We had conversations with Microsoft to say, hey, partner with us and let's try to figure this out collaboratively. If you want to work with us, we'll work with you. So then that began a relationship that we had with Microsoft that then led us down this road of where in 2018, we started again and we started our Intune journey. And this time we chose just to do the cloud only option. So the Azure AD join only option. And since that time, we've been using Intune for now 2 years, and we have been very happy with the product and everything that it's given us for managing now over 30,000 devices.
It's interesting, the partner and you went down the co-management route, which ultimately failed. Is it because co-management answered the needs that you had? Was it because the partner wanted you to do it, or neither of you knew enough about the solution on what really made sense going forward? Like, why did you look at co-management to begin with?
Yeah, I think when we first were looked at it, we were looking through the lens of trying to take what we already had and then just trying to make it work over in Intune. And in hindsight, looking back, that was not the right decision to make. I think because there's so much, right, that we've invested into SCCM over the years, because we've had it in this district for many, many years. There's a lot of legacy things. There's obviously a lot of old that's been in that environment for many years, all the way back to like XP days. And all we're doing is just trying to take that and then transfer it. And what we realized after failing and then restarting was that there's a lot of stuff in there that we actually just didn't need. And it was good to kind of start fresh. The partner that we engaged at the time, they kind of laid out the different options. And not to say that they were bad in that regard, but I don't think that co-management was still fairly new, and it wasn't ready for prime time in that case and time when we first engaged it. There were still a lot of issues that Microsoft was working on. There were still a lot of things that weren't able to talk back and forth between SCCM and Intune. I know it's come a long way since then, and I've heard of other districts and people who have had success with that road. But for us in that time, it did not work, and it ultimately led us to have to really rethink what is it that we are truly needing, and why would we want to take kind of our legacy systems and then just kind of copy it out into this Intune cloud environment. So instead, we decided to kind of build a firewall and basically say, okay, what's over here in this legacy environment we no longer want, and what's over here, we're going to start fresh. We're going to have a fresh look and a fresh perspective of everything and start that way. And that was a great decision that we had made at that time. And it's led us to where here we are 2 years later, when lockdown happened in Washington State, when COVID was really high. The last thing we had to worry about was, how do we manage these 23,000 devices? It was a seamless transition for our students to take home devices, and it was a seamless transition for our staff to have to work remotely. What they instead were asking themselves was, well, how do we teach remotely now? And we could focus our time and attention and resources on that. We could focus on how do we get digital curriculum and making the necessary changes for that. So, and then for like business office functions, how do we access those internal applications or those processes that we need to in a remote way? And so that was kind of the shift that we had done in that way.
So I think it's awesome that it didn't go great the first time and that you still adopted it, right? Because that's great resilience, it's growth mindset, it's what we do in technology. Sometimes we get burned because we're a little too early or we make the wrong decision early on, but we always go back to it and we try to constantly improve. What was the hardest part of adopting Intune?
I think the hardest part of adopting Intune was trying to remember to not try to bring that legacy way of thinking and mindset, and then also trying to get our IT personnel on that same bandwagon, so to speak. So trying to get them to understand, no, we're going to start fresh. And when we first started down the Intune journey, we thought it was just, we're just going to kind of learn how to manage devices. What we didn't realize was, no, it was a total IT transformation, a total technology transformation. So it started off with, how do we manage cloud devices in this way? Then it became, well, how do people get access to files in the cloud? So then we started transitioning people over to OneDrive and SharePoint. Then it became, well, then how do people, print? But then the real question was, well, do we even need to print? Is there digital submission options? Is there ways of sharing with people without the need to print? And then it became the question of, well, we have a bunch of this old curriculum that's, books and paper and pencil. And then it became, well, we have these digital ink devices. Why do we need that? Why don't we look at digital content and digital curriculum? And so that was kind of the shifting that we started to do. But that all started with just us asking the question of, well, we want to use Intune. And then all of these other things came up, and we started shifting towards that as a part of that. So single sign-on was a big piece, is getting all of our digital curriculum and web applications and software and stuff to become single sign-on enabled. So that way when people went to go to those websites, it all logged in and it was all managed by one identity provider, which we chose as Azure AD.
So you did a lot of this, right, as a IT team. And of course you had some Microsoft sponsorship, right? You had some local Microsoft representatives. You live in the Washington area, so there's not a shortage of Microsoft people in the state of Washington. Though wherever you are, in the world, there's going to be some type of Microsoft representative in education that you can reach out to. But what about a partner? I know a partner worked out early on with CoManagement. What could have a partner done this second time around that would have made your life easier, especially to the folks that don't have as many resources as you had available to yourself?
Yeah. So like you said, we had the benefit of having a Microsoft expert, Intune expert help us on our journey. But one of the things that we enjoyed most about that person was how they guided us on how to just get started. And then they were also with us from, beginning of setting up Intune to just kind of setting some base policies and, trying some software. But ultimately what we really loved was the relationship that we built with them and how they were with us throughout the entire journey, and that they were a resource for when we had questions. So a big example I always share of this is, we started Intune, and we started managing devices, just kind of getting our feet wet and learning. And so we applied some basic policies and made some software available. And I remember our director, he had one of our Intune devices and he started playing around with it. Well, next thing you know, he comes out to me and he goes, "Jeff, how do I print?" And I went, "Oh, how do you print with the Intune device and in this kind of cloud-based world?" So then we had to go down and explore that. And I remember thinking that, and I emailed our partner and I said, "Hey, how do you print?" And so then that began that discussion. And then as we started rolling these out to our teachers and our students, we got requests as, "Well, how do we get fonts? We need fonts for some of the work that we've done." And I was like, "Oh, well, how do you get fonts in Intune managed world?" And so then I asked again that partner that question, and then we walked down that road. And there was many things that came up as a result of that. So how do we provide remote assistance? How do we also do local admin passwords? And a bunch of things, printing and fonts, and there's many other things from software. So, putting it in a central dashboard, which is company portal. So a lot of that came out of those conversations. And every time that we encountered one of those issues, it was crucial to our deployment that we had somebody that we could reach out to, not only there from the beginning, but then also throughout our journey into moving into Intune. And so I think from a partner perspective, that's one of the benefits that a customer can have, is just a resource, somebody that they can just ask a question to and say, "Hey, we're trying to do this," or, "Hey, how do we do this? I don't know." And just having that resource has been a huge win for us.
So, when you engage a partner and you're talking to that partner, what impresses you more? That they know education or that they have the tech skills? Because sometimes we have a lot of great partners in the world who have done awesome integrations, have built really cool stuff, but have never stepped foot in a classroom and might not know how to talk to education, to educators or those in that industry. How much does that matter to you?
I don't think that they need to have education experience, meaning that they've, say, worked for an education institution in some way, shape, or form. However, I would say that they need to have the ability to understand where the unique challenges that education can be faced with. So for example, the partner that we had from Microsoft, he did not work in education. He was a member of the Intune EDU internal Microsoft, but he did not have any related experience with education. When he began his work with us, and they were working with us on a constant basis, he could understand our needs and what we were asking for. And because they had the technical expertise, they were able to then help us dig deep or to find the resources or the technologies that would then give us what we needed. So I don't think that they need to be like from education specifically, but they need to know how to interact with education in IT, education leaders. In some cases, I know that the person we partner with, they interacted a lot with our director, because our director would say, "We need to think through this lens." And our partner that we had, they were able to understand and then able to say, "Well, here's what we could do." And that was kind of that's what I would say a partner needs to understand whenever they're engaging with a EDU customer, is being able to see through the EDU customer's lens.
I think that's important. You don't have to come from a school, but you need to understand how schools work, or at least be willing to learn how schools work. So looking forward, at the time of this recording, we are in the last month of 2020. We are about to tip over into 2021. What are some of the problems that you're looking to solve in this coming school year? It seems like you have your feet under you when it comes to device management for remote learning. You have a system that's working as best as it can work right now. What's next on your plate?
Yeah, what's next on our plate is security is one of our main focuses. EDU has been the target of several cyber attacks in the news lately. And so one of the things that we want to spend our time and energy and focus on is really upping our security game and doing what we can to ensure that our staff and students are safe. All the trust that the community has given us is secure, and making sure that those projects that we have are focused in that direction. So some of the things that we're looking into is privileged access workstations for our very high administrative level functions, for things like domain controllers and Azure AD infrastructure and stuff like that. Backup in DR. So and DR is disaster recovery. So really kind of doing a revamp of what that looks like for us, and how do we make sure that those are working in a way that is going to, in the event that something does get compromised, we have what we need to be able to handle that. Retention, figuring out things from email retention to document retention, and then not only like retaining that properly, but making sure that that doesn't get leaked in any example. So trying to figure out tools and stuff that can help us with that. And then now that we're using some other platforms with Microsoft, as far as Microsoft Teams with our classes and courses, is it's making sure that our governance around Microsoft 365 is set up in a way that makes sense. So those are kind of the things that we're looking there. Ultimately, I think what we're looking for is being able to utilize and leverage the full Microsoft stack that we're paying for in a way that's effective and gives us exactly what we need in education, because there's so much that we can do, but it's really, what does it make sense? And then how do we make sure that we're spending our dollars in a way that gives us all the tools, all the security, all of the end user experience that we're looking for?
I think security is a very interesting one, because a lot of our partners hear security and the next step that they try to do is MFA for students. Right, and that's the security solution, is MFA for students. And when you go to describe security, you take it back a little bit farther and say, hey, at our IT level admin access, we can probably do more there. And then your probably next level is school leadership, right? What's on their drives, physical and virtual, that needs to be protected, and their identities. And then you probably go maybe start to look at staff and what needs to be protected. But you're not jumping in with MFA for students, right?
No.
Okay, that seems to be the big thing. That's like, oh, we'll just turn it on for every kid, and maybe students have access to cell phones and they want to have the Authenticator app and do that, and that's fantastic from a security point of view. But you have laptops going down to pretty young students, right? What's the lowest grade that you serve?
Yeah, so currently we are 1-to-1 full pre-K, so pre-kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. So we have over 23,000 devices in the hands of our students, all the way from students as young as 4 years old.
Yeah, so a 4-year-old pulling out their phone to do multi-factor authentication and then type in the code. Sounds and probably would look really cool, but it's also likely not reality right now.
And I think one of the biggest issues I would question those who kind of consider that is, how do you solve the equity issue? Mm-hmm. For those students and families who may be in a different situation and experience, how are they going to be able to do MFA if that's something that they can't afford? If they can't afford a cell phone for their students, or if they don't have one, well, then what are the other ways that you're going to solve that equity issue? And that's a big proponent of what we try to do here in Puyallup, is make sure that we are doing as much as we can to provide equitable learning across all of our students, and meeting that need. So
that's great. That's a great spot to end this interview, is equity for all, when we have so much requirements on what it takes to be an online learner, a hybrid learner, a digital learner today, and how does the IT department bridge that gap in a way that empowers all students to learn. Jeff, thank you so much for the work that you do on a daily basis. I'm a former teacher turned IT, so I appreciate the work you do from that perspective. I'm a parent of a second grader who appreciates the technology that she's able to use to make learning a little bit more fun, especially in these challenging times. And as a member of society, the work that happens in schools is so important for the future of our world. So Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for agreeing to come on and answer a whole bunch of questions. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.